first level of organization to your business. And then each box you can get more and more detailed with operation plans, checklists, so everything gets done and it gets done the same way every time. So once you've got your company put together, you really have to know what the company is going to do. So you need to put together information on what your service or product is. Again, as detailed as possible.
And again, we were talking about the value added thing. You have to explain how it benefits the customers that you're selling to. Other things like product life cycle and other things to keep in mind is advancing technology, because what you're doing today is going to change a little bit as time moves ahead, and you have to stay ahead of the game there and realize that.
Right. This is where you want to focus on what makes you stand out for the customer. You want to talk about the benefits, the features. You want to talk about why the customer needs this. What problem are you solving? As Chip said, you want to talk about life cycle. Is this something that your customer is going to buy once and that's it? Or is it something that they're going to have to replace over time? Talk about seasonality of a product. If your business is an ice cream truck, obviously you are going to make most of your money in this, late spring and summer rather than in the winter. So what are you going to do during those down months? You should know what services and products you are going to offer. Are you going to offer a single product? Are there different ways that product or service can branch out? This is where you go into all of that. And again, the more detailed, the better. And this is one of the reasons that I always insist that a business owner should write their own business plan. You can absolutely get help from a consultant or an advisor, but they should be writing the plan as opposed to hiring somebody to write it for them, because they need to know this information like the back of their hand, especially if they're going to be looking for funding. Investors want to know that you know your product or service. You know your company, you know your market. So this is not just a matter of putting all of this on paper for someone else. It's a way for you to learn all the ins and outs of your business and make sure that you really understand what it is you're going to be doing.
Yeah, and if you look at that, what you're doing, and it is something that's very unique that you're doing differently from other people, this is the time for you to take a look at the possibilities of things like copyrights and patents and that kind of thing. And again, you need to get a lawyer involved to do those kind of things. But if you want to protect the way that you're doing things, you have to identify that also. And if that is in process and you're looking for investors or for a loan or whatever, that really adds a lot of credibility to what you're doing if you actually have a patent in process or copyright in process and that kind of thing.
Right. When you're talking about patents, copyrights, these are things that are called barriers to entry. And especially from an investment point, people want to see that there are barriers to entry, that it's not going to be easy for you to come out with your product and then somebody to see it and immediately copy it. So you have to get into that information as well. Now, once you've got all that, how are you going to sell it? How are you going to market it? You need to put together a marketing plan. And again, a marketing plan is something that is very important, very detailed, and we'll be going into details of a marketing plan in a future episode. But for the purpose of the business plan, you need to have at least the basics down. Where are you going to sell your product? Are you going to put up an online store, or are you going to go to retailers? Is your service going to be available locally, or is it going to be a national service? You need to understand all of these things and understand how you're going to reach your target market.
Yeah, the goal of your marketing plan is to actually define how you're going to attract customers and also retain them. So it's really, really important to have that. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, each of which have to be explored. Obviously, there's traditional marketing face to face. You do have the internet, which is amazing these days. There's strategic partnerships. There's all types of different things to explore. And, what you have to do with your marketing plan is to explore all these and figure out what's the best way to go about. And it's going to be a combination of things. It's not going to be something that's normally simple unless it's just like an online store that's very, very easy to get to.
Right. And even as an online store, how are people going to find out about that store? You need to go into all of that. How are people going to find you? How are they going to find out about you? List the activities you're going to do. Budget, and it's important to find out what each of these things are going to cost. When you're putting together your budgets, and we'll get to that in a minute, it's important that everything be accounted for. So you need to know if you're going to run commercials, where are you going to run them? How much do those cost? Do you need to put a commercial on national television, or can you target via a cable station or a local system? You need to understand all of these things. And again, that's why we're going to go into this in more detail in a future episode.
Yeah, and your marketing plan really has to be in sync with your organization plan too, because the bottom line is getting the work in is one thing, but if you overload yourself and you can't get it done, you're going to clobber yourself that way and you are going to go out of business very, very quickly. So those have to be looked at together as your capacities, how you're going to get things done. So although these are separate parts of the plan itself, you have to really take a look at all of those. So the next thing to look at is if you're looking for funding, you have to have a very, very detailed funding request in your business plan. And this is what you're looking for, why you're looking for it, the type of funding that you're looking for, because there's a lot of different ways to go after that.
All right. You can be looking at angel investors. You can look at venture capital. You can look at crowdfunding. There's a lot of different ways to get funded. The traditional bank loan, whatever it is in this section of your plan, you need to understand how much money you're going to need and be very specific about what it's going to cover. Is it going to cover materials, salaries, marketing and advertising? Do you need to rent office space? You need to figure out what your costs are and how they're all going to be covered. And that's what people need to see in this section. Now, there's also something else. A lot of people write a business plan, but they don't necessarily need funding. They may already have funding or they're bootstrapping. The information in this section is specifically geared towards getting funding. However, it's valuable information even if you're not looking for it, because it helps you figure out all of your operational costs. And it helps you look at the next section, which are the financial projections.
Yeah, and there are a lot of great resources out there to help you with this portion of your business plan. You can talk to your bank because anybody you get funding from is going to have what's called a project list. It's going to have a form with line items on there where you're going to fill in exactly what you're going to be doing, how much it's going to cost, where the funds are going to come from. There's a lot of state agencies that can probably give that to you. Banks are good at doing that also. But it's really good to just go down the line as far as everything that you're looking for. Here in Connecticut, where sometimes we don't think things are that great, they do have a loan program that's got a pretty good application that lays this out. And if you go into the Fast Start program, in the Connecticut website, you can at least take a look at the form and see the line items that are on there so you make sure you're catching everything. Because funding can come for a lot of different reasons. It's not just buying plant and equipment. There's all different other types of things that go into it.
Absolutely. And when you're putting together your financial projections, you're looking at a 5-year period of time. And you're talking about forecasted income, balance sheets, cash flow statements, figuring out your capital expenditure budget. What are you going to be spending? What are you going to be bringing in? Here's the trick. You want your projections to be optimistic, but not unrealistic. You have to be able to say, yes, this is feasible. Because otherwise you're going to get 18 months into your plan and you may run out of money. So you have to be realistic about what these numbers show. That being said, when you project these things 5 years down, I don't know any business plan that has ever been correct for years 4 and 5. Things change, the economy changes, technology changes. It may be harder to put your product together than you anticipated. It may be easier.
No, and that's why it's so important as far as ongoing operations. You have to visit your business plan, especially your financial projections, very, very frequently, at least every year, to go over that and update things. Because you're right. If you're looking 4 or 5 years out, it's kind of like a crystal ball. A lot of companies will just say, I'm going to be increasing by 10% a year or this or that. But you have to get something down and you have to be monitoring things. And as you do this, you're going to get better at it, because when you first do a budget, you might miss a couple of things. But as time goes on, you're going to be finding things that were missing from it, and it's going to make you a whole lot more efficient looking ahead. So really, really important. A business plan, especially financial projections, are not just a one and done thing.
And something to remember about these projections is that even the best people miss projections periodically. You hear it all the time on the news when companies are reporting quarterly earnings. These are companies that have been in business for decades, and they missed the estimates for this quarter. Things happen. Don't worry about if you're missing it, as long as you understand why you missed those estimates or why you overshot those estimates, and you can adapt your financial projections to meet reality. So once you've finished all of that, that's when you go back to the beginning and do the executive summary. And your executive summary is just that. It is a summary of the entire document that you have put together.
It's the highlight of what's in the business plan. It's like taking a look at a book at Barnes & Noble and looking at the inside cover to see what it's all about before you decide whether you want to read it or not. So it's the highlights, and by going through all these steps that we just talked about, it won't be too hard to put that together.
Right. And in fact, if you do this last, it should actually be the easiest part, because you've done the research, you've put the plan together. Now you're just putting together a quick summary of it that's going to entice somebody to read the rest of the plan. So we're coming up on the end of our time today. So Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for putting together a business plan?
Well, you heard all of the components that we were talking about, and what you said at the beginning, do it yourself. Make sure that you're in charge of that. You can get help on the outside to guide you through it. It is so important to do it yourself. But the bottom line is every business needs a business plan, so you got to do it.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway for me is do the plan and do the research. It may seem burdensome, but that research will benefit you, not just when you're doing the plan, but when you're actually running the business. When you have all of this information internalized, it makes you a better business person, and it makes it easier to run a company.